Hello everyone and welcome to another Twilight Zone Retro Review. Today it is Season 1, Episode 15, I Shot an Arrow into the Air. Interesting title. This episode was written by Rod Serling and it stars Dewey Martin as Corey and Edward Binns as Colonel Donlin. So the basic premise of this episode is that a spaceship does go up into the air and it apparently just disappears from radar. It can't be tracked. And we find out soon after that there were 8 men in this ship and 4 survived. We are introduced to our main characters who are the Colonel and Corey, and right away we see a conflict between the 2 men as the Colonel is writing something in his journal explaining what he thinks happened, and Corey is saying they should be using their energy and their brain power to find a way to get some help or figure out a way to get back home, as they're not really sure where they crashed. And then we're introduced to a 3rd man, Pearson, who basically sides with the Colonel. And the 4th man is in pretty bad shape. They're not even sure if he'll survive. He's basically just laying on the ground. Which does lead to a dilemma because the Colonel and Pearson are giving him water, and Corey is arguing that they shouldn't give the man water because he's not going to make it anyway, and they're just wasting their resources. So this is important because it shows the moral dilemma that goes into something like this, and that will be important throughout the episode. There's also an interesting scene where Pearson and the Colonel talk about how they must be in the same orbit because the sun is very similar to theirs, so is the atmosphere, the air, and that's the one good thing, fortunately, is that they can survive in that respect. That gives you a hint for a big spoiler later on, I would say. And then basically they're once again just having a conflict. Pearson is giving the man who's not doing well water again, and him and Corey get in a fight over it, and basically the man passes away. So Pearson tells Corey now he'll be happy because the man is no longer with them. So you can see that at this point that Corey's pretty much out just to survive while the other men are trying to keep some type of order and moral ground present. So what happens next is I think a little time passes and they're going off to see if they can find anything, any signs of resources, any type of help, or to figure out where they are. So they decide to go off and try and figure this out. Well, it turns out the Colonel's waiting and Corey and Pearson were supposed to go out and figure out what was going on. Well, Corey comes back by himself, says he didn't find anything, just the same old nothing that they've been finding. And he says Pearson went a different way and he didn't come back. While the Colonel, knowing how Corey's been behaving, suspects right away that Corey might have done something to Pearson. So he says they're going to go find him. Corey doesn't want to, but they both go. Well, it turns out they do find Pearson, and he's crawled a ways a little bit, and he's in bad shape. It looks like he's not going to make it, but before he passes on, he draws something in the sand. And he doesn't really have a chance to finish it, and they're not sure what he was trying to draw. But this is another hint to the end of the episode. So what winds up happening then is the Colonel accuses Corey straight out of killing Pearson. Corey then decides to get rid of the Colonel as well, rationalizing he can last twice as long because he'll have double the resources without the Colonel there. And this is where we get into the morality thing again, where he talks about that morality doesn't need to exist in this type of survival situation. And it's an interesting dilemma. And then Rod Serling starts a narration, not quite at the end of the episode, which is a bit unusual, but as Corey's walking up the mountain to see what Pearson discovered or didn't discover, who knows, Rod Serling's just talking over this, which is interesting. I could take it or leave it. The narration's okay. And then we get to the top of the mountain, and Corey realizes that they never left Earth the entire time, as he sees telephone poles, which is what Pearson was trying to draw in the sand, and he sees a sign that says Reno and Nevada. It's like 40-some miles away, and Rod Serling talks about how The basic message of this episode is to keep your morality in all situations. There's still a place for human beings to act that way, which is fine. It's a solid episode and an interesting dilemma, but there's one big problem with this episode, at least in my mind. Others may find it more satisfactory, but if these guys were trained astronauts and they studied this stuff ahead of time, went up in this ship, wouldn't they recognize that they never left Earth to begin with? Should we really believe? Were they just delusional? Were they panicked? Did they not have enough food and water so they couldn't think clearly? But really, it never even dawned on them that they might have never left Earth, and that's why they weren't picked up on radar. It just seems a little bit odd that never even crossed their minds at all. To me, anyway. Like I said, I guess it's plausible to some, but for me, that kind of makes this whole thing a little bit of a shaky premise. But as far as the story and everything is interesting, the acting's fine. I'm just not sure about that. But the episode works, and like I said, others may find that a bit more to their liking, that plot point. So overall, I'm going to give I Shot an Arrow into the Air a 3 out of 5. 3 stars out of 5 for this episode. And as always, thanks for watching. You can leave comments and subscribe below. Thanks.